Assalamu alaikum students, how are you all? Hope you all are good and doing well. So students, today is our second lecture of science, which is about laboratory safety and taking measurements. First of all, we will discuss about some laboratory safety, that how can we save ourselves while working in a laboratory. Okay, so look at just these two pictures. You can feel the clearly difference in these pictures. In first picture, the students are playing with fire or instrument and they didn't even wear mask, lab coat or glasses. So, for doing work in lab, you should wear a lab coat, you should wear glasses, you should not run in the lab, do not play with instruments, and do not play with fires because it can be really destructive for you and can damage to you and can harm you. So, in order to save yourself from these distractions, you should follow the lab rules. Our next topic is about taking measurements. So, for this, to understand the concept, we must read that what's written in it. In everyday life and when carrying out scientific experiments, you use your senses to make observations. You can smell gases given off, see colors change, and hear fizzes and pops. However, you cannot use your senses for everything and you cannot trust them to give the correct answers. What we are trying to say in this is that whenever we have to make some observation, obviously in general we observe these things with our sense organs, but in scientific experiments we cannot sense these or we cannot observe this only with our senses. We must need some instruments or some measurements instruments to measure these measurements. For this, fortunately, there are many occasions such as weighing yourself at home or doing experiments in classes when you do not have to depend on your senses to make observations. You can use measuring instruments instead. So, do not depend entirely on your senses. Use a measuring instrument whenever you can. The photographs below show some measuring instruments, what they measure and the units used. So, the first one is length. That how can we measure the length and what is the instrument for measuring the length? So, for measuring the length of some object, we can use a ruler or a tape measure. And the length is measured in some units, which is millimeters, centimeters, meters and kilometers. These all are the units of length in which we can measure some object. You can see the ruler here or a tape measure. The next one is volume. That how can we measure volume? So for this we must know that what is volume. So volume is the space occupied by an object. The volume of a regular shaped object such as a cube can be found by multiplying its length by its width and by its height. So what is volume? Volume is basically something that an object is occupying the space. Okay, and it may be regular or irregular. For example, just look at the cube in the diagram. It is basically a regular volume object. Or on the other hand, there is a picture of liquid, and obviously the liquid is not in regular shape. It is always in irregular shape. Means the container in which we put the liquid, it takes the shape of that container. So, in order to find out the volume of a regular object, what we do is that we multiply its length by its width. For example, this is a cube surface. This is the length of that cube, this is the width of that cube, and this is the height of that cube. So what we'll do that we multiply all these terms to find the volume of that cube. On the other hand, there is an irregular substance, that is water or some liquid. So in order to measure that substance, we put it into a measuring cylinder. In measuring cylinder, measurements are just given on that cylinder, so we can easily determine the volume of an irregular shape. And what are the units of the volume? Volume is basically measured in liters, milliliters, and cubic centimeters. Next one is mass. What is mass? Mass is basically the amount of matter in something. What is matter? You know, matter is anything that occupies some space, and we divide matter into three physical states, that is solid, liquid, and gas. And matter is the space occupied by some object. So the mass of something can be found by using weighing scales or a balanced gram and kilogram. Gram and kilogram are basically the units of mass in which we measure the mass. Okay. So next term that is to be measured is temperature. What is temperature? Temperature means how hot something. It not only we can say that hot object, we can also say that to measure how hot or how cold is some object, because temperature can be low or high as well. So the temperature of something can be found by using a thermometer. We can measure temperature by using a thermometer. Degrees Celsius, sometimes called degree centigrade. This is the unit of temperature. On the Celsius scale, numbers were chosen so that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade and freezes at 0 degrees Celsius or 0 degrees centigrade. The lowest possible temperature is called absolute zero, which is also known as minus 273 degrees Celsius. For some science work, it is convenient to use a temperature scale starting at absolute zero. This scale is called the Kelvin scale and has degrees which are the same as those in the Celsius scale. Thus, 273 Kelvin equals 0 degrees Celsius and 373 Kelvin equals 100 degrees Celsius. This is for that if we are using some Kelvin scale, so we can easily observe or we can easily measure it. That's why they told us that 273 Kelvin is equals to 0 degrees Celsius, like it means that the water is freezed, and 373 Kelvin is equals to 100 degrees Celsius. It means the water has attained its boiling point. Okay. And the other scale is Fahrenheit scale. And what is Fahrenheit scale? The Fahrenheit scale has much smaller degrees than the Kelvin and Celsius scale. In this scale, the degrees are much more lower than both of the scales that we discussed before. On this scale, water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit and boils at 212 degree Fahrenheit. Okay, and the units of temperature are Celsius and Fahrenheit. In that box of did you know, they have provided some information about standard units. SI units. SI units means standard international units, the units that are used in all over the world. Okay. The standard units used for measurements are called SI units. For example, SI unit of length is meter, SI unit for mass is kilogram, and SI unit for time is second. Next is time. That how can we measure time? We can measure time with the help of some stop clock or stopwatch. Seconds and minutes are the units of time that we can measure the time in these two units, that is second and minutes. In the diagram you can see the stopwatch and stop clock as well. Some other units are also given, that is units, hour, minute and seconds. So that's all about the second lecture, which was about laboratory safeties and taking measurements, that how can we take measurements of some objects.
Okay, students, let's have a look and test yourself. First question number one is, why do scientists use measuring instruments?
Scientists use measuring instruments to get information results, as they cannot depend on their senses. Which units are used to measure volume, length, mass, time and temperature? Volume measures in milliliters, centiliters, liters and cubic centimeters. Length measures in meters, millimeters, kilometers and centimeters. Mass measures in grams and kilograms. Time measures in seconds and minutes. And the temperature measures in degrees Celsius. Question number 3 is, which measuring instrument would you use to measure mass of a bag of flour, length of a piece of cloth, volume of a stone, temperature of a cup of tea and the time taken to run a race? So, electronic balance, tape measures, measuring cylinder, thermometer and stopwatch is used respectively. Question number 4 is, make a list of 4 measuring instruments in your home.
Clock,
Clock,
tape measures, thermometer and weighing scale.